as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to impact economies and, of course, disrupt global supply chains. What impact will the COVID-19 induced lockdowns have on the unemployment figures in Nigeria? Damilola Akinbami, the head of research at Financial Derivatives, now joins me for this discussion. Damilola, a pleasure to have you join us for this conversation on Closing Bell, West Africa. At this point, during the COVID season that we are in, clearly, when you think about the realities and the dynamics that the world is having to grapple with, when you think unemployment in Nigeria, what bothers you the most?
Yes, definitely. Unemployment in Nigeria is going to increase. The most recent figures that are available are that Q3 2018, of which the unemployment rate was 23.1% and underemployment was 20%, so making it an average of about 43%. And what we've seen now, because of the lockdown that has been implemented in 3 cities and movement restrictions, a lot of companies have shut down, businesses are closed, so people cannot work. And Nigeria also has a high informal economy. So what definitely this is going to lead to is that companies are going to try and boost their profits or at least remain lean by cutting down on excesses. And some other areas where they're going to try and reduce costs will be in terms of salaries. So we might see staff either being laid off or salaries being reduced, or even people going on unpaid leave. And this would have a huge impact on unemployment numbers. So the 43% that we're seeing now as at Q3 definitely could spike to about 60% or even more.
Clearly, Dami, we're seeing further restrictions. Latest off the top of that is the fact that we have all the state governors across Nigeria in the last 24 hours come to an agreement to further embark on a 2-week interstate lockdown across the country. Now, I'm interested in what sectors will suffer the most as far as unemployment in Nigeria goes.
Okay, so definitely transportation will be affected significantly. We're just analyzing some figures, especially with the inflation numbers that came out. And we've noticed that food inflation, definitely in March, the impact wasn't as significant. But by the time you look at April's inflation numbers, they are going to be significant. Why? Because, one, there's scarcity. 2, even moving these goods and commodities from the farms to the market will become a challenge because of the restrictions. And now there is now going to be a nationwide lockdown. It becomes even more difficult to transport commodities from one point to another. So definitely the transportation sector would be affected. We also believe that agriculture, to an extent, is going to be affected. Aviation, we're already seeing that most airlines are saying that they may not pay their staff salaries in the month of April. So we're seeing that because obviously there's restriction in travel and whatever. So aviation definitely is going to be affected. Manufacturing too, hotels, tourism and entertainment sectors are also some of the sectors that are going to be affected because of the social distancing and movement restriction. We've seen that people are staying at home. Nobody's going to restaurants to eat. Everyone is avoiding public gatherings. So these are some of the sectors that will be worst affected as a result of the pandemic.
Globally, Dami, it's a burning house. We know that. But thinking about what can be saved while the house is burning, to what extent do you think that the palliative measures that the government has offered to the economy and continues to offer here within Nigeria, especially, to what extent can they save jobs in the meantime?
Well, what has been done so far, yes, it's good, but I don't think it's sufficient enough to actually address the underlying issues. So in terms of the impact on the welfare of consumers, for instance, we know that the government has come up with palliative measures of giving about 2,000 or 5,000 naira to the poor and vulnerable. But the thing is, how do you classify the people that fall into that category? What's the implementation process going to be like? Is it going to be properly implemented and carried out? So these are some of the challenges that are actually going to be that need to be considered. So, yeah, the measures are good, but the impact might actually fall short than what is expected. And even in the banking industry, we know that, yes, interest rates, the CBN has tried to create some moratorium and even try to reduce interest rates to an extent by pegging its lending rate. But the thing is, again, most companies are still borrowing at rates above 12-13%, and these companies are not producing. So their costs are still high, and that needs to be addressed. The MPC is going to meet next month. It should be one of the considerations to be discussed at that meeting that, okay, are we going to address the benchmark interest rates, or are we going to tinker with the cash reserve ratio? We know most African countries have actually cut down their interest rates. South Africa has done that. Ghana has done that. Kenya has done that. Is Nigeria going to toe that path? So these are some of the things that will be considered. And again, we've seen improved coordination between the fiscal and monetary policy authorities, and that would have a positive impact on how these stimulus measures would impact on the economy and the welfare of the people.
Now, Dami, outside of the regulators and what we await that they should do in the coming days, we are all being forced to think in different ways. If we look internally, to what extent or what do you think employees across the country could do in whatever way to save their own jobs now while we wait for what the regulators can do?
Well, the lockdown has forced a lot of businesses, companies to look inwards. A lot of companies are now working from home. That is one habit that wasn't the norm in Nigeria before. So it just shows you that you can actually take advantage of technology by using apps such as Zoom, Microsoft apps, and all that to actually carry out your work. So you don't necessarily have to shut down because you can't move around. You can work from home. And I think a lot of companies are doing that so that there's no store in the business flows. And also, one of the sectors that actually would benefit, because I know we talked about the sectors that will be most affected, the telecoms industry is one of the sectors that would benefit the most. And we know that even telecom industries are thinking of how they can maybe merge or come together to share the spectrum, because obviously there's increased demand on the broadband in terms of data and voice. So that also can be looked into. So companies definitely can increase working from home tactics. And again, it will reduce your brick and mortar cost. So you're obviously not spending your expenditure, for instance, on diesel and all that would reduce. So these are some of the things I think post-COVID, post the removal of the lockdowns and whatnot, companies can continue with these efficiency gains that they are beginning to adopt, and it should impact on their business.
Thanks for always, Dami. Damilola Akinbami is the head of research at Financial Derivatives.